Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving deep into a topic that's super relevant to anyone out there who's trying to improve their English speaking skills.
That's right. We're going to be taking a close look at this YouTube video called Think in English, Improve Your Speaking.
It's a pretty popular one, and for good reason. It's packed with useful strategies and insights. But the main idea, the thing that really caught my eye, was this concept of thinking in English as the key to fluency.
Yeah, the video argues that it's not just about sounding more natural. Thinking in English can actually help you speak more confidently and accurately, too.
And they even suggest that it can affect your dreams. I mean, that's pretty wild, right?
Right. There are a bunch of other unexpected benefits the video highlights, like feeling less mentally tired from all that translating and building a stronger vocabulary.
Okay, so I got to ask, why exactly is thinking in English so important? What makes it such a game changer?
Well, the video uses this really cool metaphor of a bridge between thoughts and words to explain it.
I love a good metaphor. Tell me more.
So imagine this. When you're trying to speak English, but you're translating in your head from your native language, it's like you're building this extra step, this bridge between what you want to say and how you actually say it.
And like any bridge, it can get kind of congested, right? Slowing everything down.
Exactly. That's when meaning can get lost in translation, just like the video says. Thinking directly in English, though, is more like taking the express lane. It's a direct route from your thoughts to the words you speak.
So no more traffic jams in our brains.
Ideally, no. And that means you can respond quicker, sound more natural, and actually be more accurate.
Gotcha. It's like the difference between reading a translated book and reading the original, right?
That's a great way to put it. But of course, the video also acknowledges that making this mental shift, well, it isn't exactly a walk in the park.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds great in theory, but how do you actually train your brain to think in a whole different language?
Well, the video makes this brilliant comparison to trying to write with your non-dominant hand. You know it's possible, but it's going to feel awkward and take some serious effort at first.
Totally. And then there's the whole vocabulary thing. I mean, what happens when you simply don't know the right word in English? It's easy to just default back to your native language out of frustration.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's the confidence issue. A lot of people are afraid to even think in English because they're worried about making mistakes, even in their own heads.
It's like having your own inner critic judging your every thought. It's no wonder people get stuck in this cycle of translating instead of truly thinking in English.
Yeah, and the video really emphasizes that. It's
Hmm.
a cycle we need to break if we want to reach fluency, but it also talks about some of the challenges we might face along the way.
Like what?
Well, first of all, it's important to remember that years of thinking in one language doesn't just vanish overnight. It's a habit, a deeply ingrained one.
So we need to be prepared for some serious mental rewiring.
Exactly. And like any habit, it takes time and effort to change. It's easy to slip back into old ways, especially when you're tired, stressed, or, you know, life just gets in the way. Consistency is key, but it can be tough to maintain.
You know, another thing the video mentioned that I think we can all relate to is overthinking. Sometimes we get so caught up in trying to be grammatically perfect that we end up putting way too much pressure on ourselves.
That's so true. And ironically, that pressure can actually make us less fluent. We forget that it's okay to make mistakes, even in our thoughts. Mistakes are actually how we learn, right?
Right. So we've talked about why thinking in English is so powerful and some of the roadblocks we might hit. But let's get to the good stuff. What are some practical ways to actually start thinking in English? The video had a bunch of tips, didn't it?
It did. And a lot of them are surprisingly simple, but really effective. Like, one of the first things the video suggests is starting with labeling.
Labeling, like putting name tags on everything in my house.
Huh, not quite, though that could be fun. It's more about consciously making the connection between the objects you see around you and their English names. Like, think chair, book, window, that kind of thing.
So just walking around my house thinking the words, I can handle that.
Yeah.
But how does that actually help with fluency?
Well, it's all about training your brain to make those associations automatically without translating. You're basically building the foundation for more complex thinking in English.
Okay, I see. It's like step one, and then the video talks about taking it up a notch with describing.
Yeah. Instead of just labeling an object, you add more detail. So instead of just chair, you might think, this is a wooden chair with a soft red cushion. You're engaging with the object in English, building those descriptive muscles.
Got it. So what's next on the list?
Well, are you ready to talk to yourself?
Uh-oh, you're starting to worry me.
Don't worry, it's for a good cause. The video calls it self-talk, and it's basically narrating your everyday activities in your mind, but in English.
Wait, so like if I'm making coffee in the morning, I'd be thinking I'm pouring the water into the filter instead of just going through the motions.
Exactly. You're turning those mundane tasks into English practice. And since it's all in your head, there's no pressure to be perfect.
Okay, that actually sounds kind of fun and super easy to fit into my day. What are some other ways to weave English into my routine?
Well, the video suggests taking self-talk a step further and actually narrating your entire day in English.
So, like, I'm the star of my own English-speaking documentary. I kind of like it.
That's the spirit. It's all about building that consistent inner monologue in English. And believe it or not, the video even suggests you try dreaming in English.
Whoa, hold on. Isn't that a bit far-fetched?
Maybe, but there's actually some research to back it up. Studies have shown that thinking about a language before bed can actually increase the likelihood of dreaming in that language.
So before I drift off, I should be reading an English book or listening to an English podcast or even texting a friend in English.
It couldn't hurt to try. And hey, at the very least, it's a relaxing way to unwind. But as you're doing all of this, it's crucial to actively build your vocabulary as well.
Right, because what happens when I hit a word, I don't know, do I just skip over it?
Definitely not. Look it up, use a dictionary app, just Google it. The point is to be proactive about expanding your vocabulary, which is crucial for fluency.
And don't just memorize the definition, right? I should try to actually use the word in a sentence, even if it's just in my head.
Exactly, that's how it really sticks. And speaking of practicing sentences, the video recommends something called thinking in questions and answers.
Oh yeah, I love this one. It's like having a little Q&A session with yourself, but in English.
Right. So you might ask yourself, what am I going to have for dinner tonight? And then answer yourself in English, like, I think I'll make a pasta dish.
It's such a great way to practice forming sentences naturally and thinking on your feet.
Exactly. Plus, it's a safe space to experiment without the fear of judgment. But what if you need a little more structure?
Good question. Because sometimes I need that extra push to stay on track.
Well, the video suggests setting small challenges for yourself. Maybe commit to thinking only in English for a specific amount of time each day, like during your commute or while you're cooking dinner.
Creating little pockets of English immersion throughout the day. Love it.
Exactly. And then there's always technology. Don't underestimate the power of language learning apps, note-taking tools, even voice-to-text features on your phone. They can really help reinforce this habit.
It's like having a whole English learning toolkit right at your fingertips.
Exactly. But before we get too carried away with all the tips and tricks, there's something super important that the video emphasizes. Be patient and celebrate your progress.
Right. Building any new skill takes time, and this is no different. I can't expect to wake up tomorrow thinking in perfect English.
Exactly. Some days will feel easier than others. It's a lot like training for a marathon, you know? Some days you'll be crushing it, and some days you'll just want to quit.
The key is to stick with it, to celebrate those small victories, and not beat yourself up over the setbacks.
You got it. Every time you catch yourself thinking in English, even for a few seconds, give yourself a pat on the back.
Maybe even a little reward, like, hey, I thought in English for a whole 5 minutes today. I deserve some ice cream.
Hey, positive reinforcement never hurts. But seriously, it's those small wins that keep us motivated in the long run.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about the power of thinking in English, some of the challenges we might face, and a bunch of practical tips to get started. But how do we know if this really works, like in the real world?
Well, what if we put some of those tips into action right here, right now? Let's do a little role-playing exercise and see how it feels.
Ooh, I like where this is going. This is where things get fun. We'll be back in just a bit to walk you through it step by step.
We'll keep it light, relatable, and hopefully have a few laughs along the way. Stick with us.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
All right, welcome back, everybody. So, are you ready to actually put some of these thinking in English tips into practice? Let's see how this works in real-life situations.
You know what? I'm actually a little nervous to try this out loud. But I'm game if you are.
Of course. And there's no need to be nervous. We'll start with something super simple, like imagine we're just chatting about our plans for the day.
Okay, I can handle that. What do you want to know?
Let's see. Tell me, what's on your agenda today? And remember, try to think through your response in English before you actually say it out loud.
Okay, all right. Give me a sec. Well, first things first, I got to hit the grocery store. My fridge is, like, completely empty. I'm thinking of making a big salad for dinner, so I need to stock up on some fresh veggies.
Sounds healthy. Anything else on your to-do list?
Oh, yeah. I promised a friend I'd help her with a project this afternoon. Shouldn't take too long, but I need to make sure I have everything we need before I head over there.
Sounds like a busy day. Any chance you'll squeeze in some time for fun?
Hmm. Well, maybe after I'm done with all that, I might treat myself to a movie. There's that new comedy I've been wanting to see.
Excellent choice. Okay, now it's your turn to put me in the hot seat. Ask me about my day. But remember, think in English.
All right, let's see if I can put you on the spot here. What are you up to today?
Well, this morning is all about emails. Catching up on messages and planning for the week ahead. It's always a bit of a scramble after the weekend.
Oh, tell me about it. Mondays, am I right?
Right. So yeah, that's my morning. And then this afternoon, I have a meeting with a colleague to brainstorm some new ideas for a project we're working on.
Sounds interesting. But come on, you gotta have something fun planned too, right?
Well, of course, you know me. Gotta have some fun. I'm meeting up with some friends for dinner tonight at that new Thai place downtown. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've heard good things. I'm getting hungry just thinking about it.
Me too. But anyway, see, even just chatting about our day can be a great way to practice thinking in English. It's all about finding those everyday opportunities to use the language.
I gotta say, that wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. It actually felt kind of natural.
That's exactly the point. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. It really is. Like any other skill practice makes perfect.
And you know what? While we were talking, I actually noticed myself catching those moments when I would normally switch to my native language in my head. I think just being more aware of those thought patterns is already helping me to shift to thinking in English more.
That's awesome. Awareness really is the first step. Now that you're more conscious of it, you can start to challenge those old habits and, really make a change.
This is making me realize that thinking in English isn't just about speaking better. It's about, like, changing the way I think in general.
Exactly. It's about training your brain to process information in a whole new way. And that can have a ripple effect on so many areas of your life, not just your language skills.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like I'm opening up a whole new dimension in my mind.
It can definitely feel that way. It's pretty exciting. But it's also important to remember that this is a journey. You're not going to be perfect overnight. There will be ups and downs, moments of fluency, and moments of frustration.
Totally. I think I'm already mentally preparing myself for those times when I'm going to feel stuck and want to revert back to my old ways. But I'm also determined to celebrate all the progress I make along the way.
That's the attitude. Remember, every time you catch yourself thinking in English, even for a few seconds, that's a win.
You're right. And those small wins can really add up over time. Okay, so what's our next step in this deep dive? I'm definitely ready to explore more ways to make thinking in English a regular part of my life.
Well, now that we've kind of dipped our toes into the practical side of things, I think it's time to go a little deeper to explore the science behind this whole thinking in English phenomenon.
Ooh, I love getting into the nitty-gritty. I have a feeling you're about to blow my mind with some fascinating facts.
I'll do my best.
Ah.
You might be surprised at just how profoundly language can shape our thoughts and perceptions.
Okay, now you've really got me intrigued. Let's dive into the fascinating world of language and the brain. Okay, so we've talked about why it's so important to think in English. We even tried it out ourselves with that role-playing exercise. But now I'm really curious to hear more about the science behind all of this. You mentioned that language can actually shape the way we think.
It's true. It's not just a tool for communication.
Mhm.
Language actually plays a huge role in how we perceive and understand the world around us.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So you're saying that the language I speak can actually influence how I see things.
Exactly. There's a whole field of study dedicated to this called linguistic relativity.
Linguistic relativity. Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me more.
Well, one of the main ideas is that the structure of a language can influence how its speakers think about things like time, space, even color.
Whoa, seriously. So, someone who thinks in English might perceive those things differently than someone who thinks in, say, Mandarin Chinese.
Yeah. That's what some studies have found. For example, there's been research showing that people who speak languages with different color terms might actually categorize colors in different ways.
That's wild.
Oh.
But how does all of this connect to thinking in English for fluency?
Well, think about it this way. By immersing yourself in the language, even just in your thoughts, you're basically exposing your brain to these new ways of structuring information and making connections.
So it's not just about memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules. It's about training my brain to think in the patterns of English.
Exactly. And this can have a huge impact on fluency. When you think in English, you're not translating, you're actually tapping into the way the language works at a much deeper level.
This is making me realize that thinking in English isn't just some random trick. It's like a whole new way of looking at the world.
I like that. It's like you're expanding your mental horizons and opening yourself up to these new perspectives.
I'm definitely feeling that shift already. Okay, so we've talked about why it's important to think in English. We've explored some practical tips to get started, and we've even touched on the fascinating science behind it all. So, what's the next step? Where do we go from here?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this is a skill that anyone can develop. It just takes consistent practice and the right mindset.
And remembering that it's okay to make mistakes along the way
Oh, absolutely. Mistakes are inevitable and actually really valuable. It's not about being perfect, it's about embracing the process of learning.
and experimenting, right? Finding what works best for you and making it a part of your daily life.
You got it. So, for anyone listening who's feeling inspired to start thinking in English, what's the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Hmm, that's a good question. I think I'd tell them to start small. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. Just pick one or two of the tips we've discussed and see how you can fit them into your routine. Even 5 minutes a day can make a huge difference.
That's great advice. And remember, be patient with yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It takes time to rewire those neural pathways and get comfortable thinking in a new language. But trust me, it's so worth the effort.
Couldn't agree more. Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about the power of thinking in English, not just for fluency, but for expanding my mind in general.
Me too. It's been a pleasure exploring this topic with you. And to everyone listening, remember, we're here to support you every step of the way.
Now, before we wrap things up, I got to ask, what's that thought-provoking question you always leave our listeners with? Something to ponder as they continue their English learning journey.
All right, here's one for you to think about. What if, instead of always striving for perfection in our English, we embrace the beauty of imperfection?
Ooh, I love that. It's like a reminder to let go of all the pressure and just enjoy the process of learning and growing.
Exactly. At the end of the day, it's the journey that matters most. So keep practicing, keep experimenting, and never stop believing in your ability to reach your goals.
Beautifully said. Well, on that inspiring note, it's time for us to say goodbye. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the fascinating world of thinking in English.
And until next time, happy learning, everyone.